Hey, team players, and welcome back. This is going to be a great day today, breaking out all of the good questions you guys have. Love when we have a full queue docked before we even start, and we're going to dive into this. And also, for those of you guys who are interested in breaking down Bob calling me out and saying I was wrong at the end of yesterday's episode, we'll be having that for once he returns today. So that being said, let's jump right into the questions here. Steve, second place. You secure your bye with a win. That's awesome. So this game does matter. So for your flex, do you want Hopkins, Pacheco, or Njoku? Obviously, we're starting Jonnu Smith in that tight end position. Normally, you wouldn't start a tight end in the flex, but you're feeling juicy with Njoku. I get it, Steve. Part of the fear that I have with Njoku this week is essentially historical Steelers at home. Mike Tomlin is on the record, actually this week on the record, of saying he doesn't enjoy playing shootouts. There's too many variabilities in which he can lose. And coming from the man who just broke the NFL record for most consecutive non-losing seasons, he got some pretty good ballpark of he's going to do what it takes not to lose, which goes right in line with what the home game against the Browns is normally, historically anyway. When the Steelers play Cleveland at home, tends to be a lower scoring game, with the exception of when the game doesn't matter to either team, because that has happened a couple times. Historically speaking, it's a lower scoring game when it's in Pittsburgh. And as a result, or because of that, the Steelers basically run the ball to submission and they take possessions away from Cleveland. Already knowing how prone Cleveland is to throwing the ball to the other team, it really could add up to a lot of Njoku just sitting on the bench all day. So I see the excitement for wanting to do Njoku. I certainly do. I am still going to go with Pacheco. And it's one of these things because the divisional games tend to have their own histories that don't make sense out of the divisional game context. Kansas City loves to show how much more powerful they are than the Chargers. It's what they do, especially at home and in a cold environment. So, Steve, in your case, with this group of three, I'm going Pacheco. Full disclosure always, I am a running back whore. But that being said, Pacheco is going to be my answer for you there, Steve. Austin, start off strictly with football question. Is it Joe Burrow's fault they are losing? A lot of people are saying Joe Burrow shouldn't get a pass, but he needs to do better in the clutch. All right, so there's two elements to this. Part of it is it's not Burrow's. Sorry for the question. It's not Burrow's fault they're losing. It's not Burrow's fault that the team is constructed in which the way that it is, which was solely on Burrow's back and it better work. There's many different ways to cut this down, but the long story short is that it's something, I think it's at 31 points. Only 7 times has a team who scored 31 or more lost in the NFL this season. And Cincinnati's 5 of them. So at some point, you need to be able to have an offensive line that can do more than just pass block, at least the internal 3 of them. And you need to be able to have a defense that can do something with a lead. You know, the Colts are a great example. It's the Peyton Manning era Colts. They had great receivers around Peyton, and then their defense was essentially a bunch of no names except for 2 elite pass rushers. Cincinnati does not have 2 elite pass rushers. What they have is Hubbard, who got like 20 sacks against the Raiders to get the lead. And that's not an exaggeration. He had at least 5 sacks against the Raiders. And that's how he's leading the league in sacks. But if you look at it in games against teams with a winning record, he has 1 sack. So they don't have a consistent or decent pass rush in Cincinnati. They also don't have a defense that can stop the run internally, nor corners that can cover, which is how you end up being able to get blown out consistently game in, game out. You could make the argument that Burrow should play a much slower, control the clock, wait till every last second, like Brady would do at certain points in his career. However, when you have the opportunity to go over the top and you have two great weapons to do it, you do it. I mean, that's just fundamental football. If you have a chance to go put a touchdown on the board, you don't dilly-dally. You always take the chance at the touchdown. So, do I think it's Joe Burrow's fault they're losing? No, absolutely not. Do I think that he should be the scapegoat for all this? I don't think that either. But I mean, how much of a pass do you really give someone who's going to have a top 5 pick? It's all right. There's no doubt he's the starting quarterback forever there. He changed a franchise, but this is not a situation where you should think they're going to be much above second or third in their division next year. There's just far too much work that needs to be done rebuilding this roster for it to be able to hit. This actually is a great example of they went out and bought a defense about 2 years ago and it aged out because in general, free agents you buy are at the last end of their career and they're just watching them age out. So Cincinnati's going to have fun, hopefully get the Burrow discount on getting people to come in and play with them. But that's their long-term problem going into this offseason. And quite frankly, if those two tackles they drafted early don't hit, they're in big-time trouble. Back to fantasy. Derek, would you drop Chuba for Dowdle or Grandel? Chuba faces Dallas next week, which makes me hesitant in dropping him, but Brooks is in there now. So I don't want to drop Chuba. Let's just start with that. I really like Chuba for everything he's been doing. He is the bright spot on the team. And in a lot of ways, you can make the argument that these guys did what you were supposed to do in terms of give a good running game. It'll make a quarterback's life easier. That's a good thing. So I don't want to run away from Chuba for that. The fear with Grenado is that he has fresh legs. So everything on paper says he should just bang it. He should do what Mason did when Mason first stepped up. Mason had a great first 6 games. The key difference between then and now is the Niners were still going for it, and the Niners were in contention. Not saying that door is shut all the way, but it's closing. And when you look at that and knowing that Shanahan has had the tendency of shutting it down, that's the fear with Grenado in the playoffs. Dowdle, no desire. Absolutely no desire to have Rico. You've seen his best 2 matchups. He was adequate at best in them. And no, by no means he wasn't elite. So I'm not running out of my way to cut them. But if you have another piece of fat you could trim off, you can talk me into picking up Grenado. But I'm not cutting Chuba for him. He's just too good for that risk. If someone who feels like Burrow is doing everything he can when there's kicker, defense, and O-line, it sucks. It's hard to overcome and win football games. Yeah, Austin, that's kind of what I was saying. I guess I should have gone through your list there up front. Now, this part is true. No other quarterback would get a pass, but I feel like it shouldn't be that way all the time. I feel like sometimes quarterbacks are not the problem, and the football community should understand that. They absolutely should. And Austin, you're not wrong. You are correct in that line of thinking. Burrow is not the problem there. And just like at the end of the day, sometimes it's not always about what the results are. You can make a good decision and not have it work out. In Cincinnati's case, they didn't think their whole defense was going to fall off the face of the earth because of their age. It did. So you can make an argument that because it did, that they were the worst front office, they know nothing about football. No, they took a gamble, and it just happened to lose on 7 out of 7 people on defense. Well, that's the cost of doing business. And like I said, at the end of the day with Cincinnati, if those 2 tackles they drafted don't pan out, they're done. And they're done for like a 6-year problem. They really need Mims to be a dude. Okay. Quick hitter. My main reason is the Bengals had a chance to win those games in the first place. It's clearly Joe Burrow without them. They'd be sitting 1-2. Yeah, I mean, without Burrow, you can make an argument they might not have won a game at all, Austin. So that's where I'm at there. I do think it's completely justified of going there. Guys, I'm going to save your deep dives, both Derek and Jesse, until the Bobbert returns when he gets here. So that way you get the full answers from both of us. I see Derek threw a deep dive in there as well. So we'll be giving to them. You guys get the quick hitters with me until Bob gets here. And as I say that, he's logging in. So welcome. And I also need to, we're going to start here, Bob.
Hey,
now that you are here. I went back and did research about what I actually said about Levis as you guys were jumping on me yesterday at the end of the episode.
Okay.
And here's what I said about Levis. I said he's inaccurate and he's probably going to get benched. And guess what happened? I was 100% right.
He is
inaccurate and he got benched.
I mean,
that being said, he did something I didn't think he was going to do. He actually got better. And the coaching staff learned him a little bit. By no means is he elite, but he's better, and he is going to win out.
I wouldn't say he got better because his completion percentage was still like 48% last week. But I would say he is better than where he was at the beginning of the season.
Isn't that the definition of getting better?
I mean, yeah, I guess, but it's not really better. You know, it's like still just so.
Right. Fair. I didn't say he's elite. He's still bottom half. He's just not. He's not bottom 4 like I thought he was going to be. So first deep dive of the day. Derek provides it to us. Win and get in, baby. PPR 3 flex. Pick 2 to sit. CD
pick
Evans,
2 not to start. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, 2 to sit. CD Evans, Ladd, BTJ, Garrett Wilson, Kelsey, McBride. Right now, I'm starting 2 tight ends. GW and BTJ were on my bench. So,
you know, I'm going to start this one off for you, Derek. And I think you've already made the right call. Kelsey and McBride are elite volume sponges. Okay. And when you have that, while McBride has had not so much touchdown luck on the year, he is still in an incredible situation because what has happened in Arizona has shifted the dynamic of the season for the Cardinals, in which they switched from being a run first kind of mentality to a passing mentality. And as that shifted over the course of the year, we have seen McBride just elevate into a stratosphere of tight ends that we haven't seen out of tight ends in a big grouping like this in years, right? It's always either been Kelsey, Andrews, the Giants one that was there a little while. You go and you ask yourself, okay, is this a good play? And while we had said earlier in the season, it's not a good idea to start 2 tight ends. In this respect, when you have 2 tight ends that are verifiable wide receiver 1s or 2s on their team, it is irresponsible not to start them. So I am heavily on Kelsey and McBride this week, especially McBride. You could talk me out of Kelsey, but I'm heavily on McBride this week. As it goes to that, I'm also on Mike Evans. The volume is there. It's the right situation. He's getting looks in the end zone. I mean, there's nothing bad you could say about Mike Evans right now. So I think that where you're at on Kelsey, McBride, and Evans is a good spot. Ladd, if he's healthy, he's playing. The volume's insane. The volume is absolutely insane. The percentage of the targets is insane. The percentage of the team yards is insane. He is the certifiable stud of this wide receiving core, and it's no question who the ball should go to almost every play.
He's the best non-quarterback rookie. I said that weird. He's the rookie of the year who's not a quarterback.
In my opinion, you are definitely starting Kelsey, definitely starting McBride, definitely starting Mike Evans, and definitely starting Ladd if healthy. Now on to CD. CD is a smart start. Yes. But I will caution that with also the fact that one of the things about CD that makes him a smart start is his volume. He's getting between 9 to 13 targets a game.
Can't beat that.
And one of the things, though, that is important to look at is the return of Brandon Cooks. Okay. Week number 1, Brandon Cooks, and week number 2, Brandon Cooks stat lines are going to look probably very different than one another. And my only concern with CD is that, yes, he's getting volume, which is great, but that volume probably won't turn into a touchdown. So
I mean, someone has to score for him.
Where I stand on CD is still worth starting. Don't get me wrong. CD is still worth starting, but I have a little bit more hesitation with Brandon Cooks there, who could potentially soak up some volume, with Schoonamaker, Tolbert, or Schoonamaker or Ferguson soaking up some volume as well. So that's like my only thing about CD. I think when we look at these other guys, and I think it's weird to say, but Parker Washington was getting into some of that BTJ target share. And Mac Jones, while he's playing better than he played with New England to a degree, is it still something that you want to invest in at this moment in time in the season? And the answer is really, the answer is really no. And then with Garrett Wilson has had some issues, but the volume is still there for Garrett Wilson as well. But as Joe has said for many, many weeks now, and this relates to a Breece Hall question a little bit later on, they've quit. And if you look at the news, Sauce Gardner is dealing with a hamstring injury. And that seems like what Joe was saying a little bit earlier about T. Higgins. You get a minor thing and your team's already done, and you're done. You're over it. Breece Hall, that's a worry. That's a huge concern, especially when they have Braylon Allen there. So I think, all things considered, that I would tie myself to teams that are still playing for something. I would tie myself to teams that are still getting volume. And if you needed a pivot off of Ladd, the volume for Garrett Wilson, I think, is a good pivot into, if you're going to pivot into anybody, if Ladd can't go. And I think that's my lean. Joe, how do you feel? I think you feel pretty much the same way, that Garrett Wilson and BTJ are with the bench this week.
Yeah, but you have to know which one you'd want to play if Ladd is out. And for me, it's going to be BTJ. You brought up a very good point about Parker diving into it, but also I look at that as he had all the practice team reps with Parker. He just was more comfy with Parker that week. Given a full week of preparing, I think that obviously BTJ will not have that issue as much. So if all are healthy, I think you got your right lineup, because it would kill me to see Kelsey score 3 touchdowns against the rival, which he's poised to do, and have him on my bench.
Bob, and here's the thing too, Derek. I mean, you're looking at, and this is why I say that CeeDee Lamb and Garrett Wilson, for me, aren't necessarily so far apart, okay? But to the same degree, they are, in a way, and I'll get to that in a moment. But what I'm looking at from Garrett Wilson, as the team is quiet quitting, okay, Garrett Wilson is
sure it's quiet.
5 for 6, 4 for 8, 5 for 10. So that speaks not to Garrett Wilson's skills or abilities. That speaks to what Aaron Rodgers has been doing, okay? CeeDee Lamb, on the other hand, where is CD here? CeeDee Lamb, on the other hand, is sitting here at 8 for 12, 10 for 12, 2 for 6. So the game where Brandon Cooks comes back, that volume did decrease. And Garrett Wilson has been pretty much, like I said about Kelsey and McBride, pretty much a sponge for volume. I mean, he hasn't dipped lower than 6 in the last 8 weeks. So while the volume for both CD, Garrett Wilson, and BTJ will be a little bit questionable this week, I think that my pivot point, and again, you look at BTJ, 10 targets last week between Mac Jones and Trevor Lawrence. If you're looking for a pivot off of Ladd, you've got to start.
Which you need to, as Steve points out, he's listed at doubtful. Probably means he's not playing.
You're most likely pivoting to guys with volume, and BTJ, to Joe's point, does have the potential to beat Tennessee's secondary. So, I mean, that is a really good point to consider as well.
And the other point there, as Steve, you're just on top of it with all the point outs here. Taylor's now officially on the IR.
Trevor, yep. I mean, we expected that to happen.
We did expect that to happen.
That wasn't a surprise.
Alrighty, so let's see where I left off here on the quick hits. Is right here with Jason. I won Grenado by $1, Jake by $1. Let's go. All right, that's good. We were breaking down that fab yesterday, so you got at least 2 of your 3. Hopefully, you got all 3 of them. So, is it okay to start 3 Niners this week? Purdy, Grenado, and Jennings. Again, desperate team. Jason, it's an all or nothing play because they are basically hanging on at their edge. They win this game, they might be back in it. They're still a step below, but they got a chance. They lose this game, they're out. So the question is at what point do they quit? Do they quit during this game? Do they win this game so they don't quit? It's potentially a dangerous build for week 16 and beyond. But for this week, I have no problem running out those 3.
Yeah, and for me, I'm just trying to look up the news here. Brock Purdy, is he healthy? I mean, I'm still willing to wait until Thursday to kind of make that decision. I think that when we look at the potential for the matchup, I think and we talked a little bit about Purdy yesterday, and my feelings about him haven't changed. The matchup is good enough for him, and it all depends on if he's healthy or not, because Jennings will soak up those targets. He'll get between 6 to 10 targets in this game. And Garendo, I think, is definitely worth a start against a Bears defense that, hasn't proven itself up to the task of stopping running backs. So, I mean, he is, and when you watch Garendo, he's super explosive, right?
He is. He's always had that.
And when you go in and look at matchups between what's going to happen with the offensive line here, the Bears are giving up a lot of yards before they get to a runner, and San Francisco is good at getting some push on the offensive line. I don't think you can bench Garendo, and I don't think you can bench Jennings unless you're starting, like we talked about yesterday with a couple people, some other guys out there that are going to be definite pieces that are going to win this week. But I think this is solid enough, Jason. I do.
So I have trouble.
I have him too. Wandale, my boy from earlier in the season. Rip Danny Dimes. Tommy DeVito can suck it, man. Like, he's ruined Wandale Robinson. Ruined him. Absolutely ruined him.
So should I stash a defense ahead of the play? If you can go get Denver and stash them, that's way more valuable than having Wandale. Picking up 2 kickers, you're never going to talk me into that. But having an extra defense, I'm there. And like I said, quite frankly, I think you're better off in the world of kicking in the fantasy playoffs because the weather sucks, is just picking a fair weather environment for the playoffs, regardless of who it is and who they're playing.
Fairbairn, let me take a look at Houston's schedule.
Well, Fairbairn's obviously in a dome and in the South, so
yeah. Well, I don't know where they're traveling. So they play at home against the Dolphins, at the Chiefs, which could be interesting, home against the Ravens, and then at the Titans. So yeah, I mean, I can see myself picking up Fairbairn to kind of bolster myself with Aubrey, but at the same point in time, I don't think you need to. I think it's better to go after the defense in the off chance, something crazy happens. But Fairbairn is worth it because he is one of the better kickers in the league right now.
So, Bob, who would you rather play, Fergie or Disley?
So, from what I heard, and maybe the news changed while I've been at work, but from what I heard, Ferguson has made not a lot of progress. I still think that Ferguson is worth picking up because he will soak up volume. If Ferguson is playing, Ferguson's my play. There's a lot of good things to say about the potentiality of the volume in this offense now with the healthy Brandon Cooks. Mm-hmm. But I'm not going to write off Disley because Disley did have a crappy game. But I'm not willing to cut him out just yet, Joe. How do you feel about him?
I'd rather play Disley. Injury risk aside, I'd rather play Disley.
That's fair.
they actually, they're going to score more points with Cooks coming
Yeah,
back. I think
CC. When I was talking with Austin yesterday and Landon, there was one thing that I couldn't remember, and it was Lutz, and I was like, oh, I wonder how many. Lutz got it like at the wire, man, at the wire. How do we like most? Who do we like most between Strader, Sanders, and Romo? Okay, so yesterday I said Romo, and Nick was here with that too. I want to caution this because what I read yesterday when I went home and was eating dinner was that they just are activating the kicker that they had before Romo to the active roster to practice. Okay, so keep your head on a swivel.
Wait, is he activated or is his window open?
I think he was activated.
Well, then Romo's going to get cut, and then you don't got to worry about it.
So it says, will Reichert injury update that he and the long snapper return to the Vikings. That's what it said. Barring any setbacks, they hope to have him for Sunday. That says barring any setbacks. So if it were me right now on Wednesday, my lean is still Romo because I think he's in the best situation. But I'd keep my head on a swivel. And if Reichert is back, he's also the kicker I would pick up. I would still pick up the Minnesota kicker, whoever it is.
Yeah,
I would still pick up the Minnesota kicker. I'd like Sanders as well, but I would still pick up the Minnesota kicker, hoping it's still Romo. Need 2 wide receivers, non-PPR. JSN, MHJ, Hopkins, DJ Moore, Waddle, Amari, or Westbrook. George, I know it's unsustainable. I really do. I get it. I understand. But I can't ignore and call me a touchdown whore if you'd like, but I can't ignore Westbrook's production, and I especially can't ignore it against a really bad defense.
That's true.
Okay, so I think my first one in your situation is Westbrook.
Yes,
I think without a doubt it's Westbrook.
Because in a standard league, touchdowns are just so much more valuable.
Yeah. As it goes to the other players on this list, Amari Cooper's a bench, unequivocally a bench. Then it gets and Waddle could be a play if the news about Sauce Gardner is true. So I'm willing to not count him out just exactly yet. I think my initial lean here, Joe, would be Westbrook and probably DJ Moore.
Oh, that hurts.
But I'm gonna write these down because I do want to give a better look at this in a moment. So
and mine would be as a quick hit, George. Mine would be JSN.
But when Metcalf came back, he wasn't getting any end zone reps. Metcalf got all of them. And the one thing about MHJ that's really nice, I'm not saying that he's nice overall, but the one thing is that the looks are increasing. Granted, they're not improving any in like the route tree or whatever, but they're increasing. So that's something to consider as a valuable point of entry into that matchup.
So, is there any new info on the Jets going to shut down Breece Hall? I have Allen. Long story short, just keep Allen. They're the Jets, so they're going to make the wrong decision, which probably means they won't shut him down because they're the Jets, and that's what the Jets do. That would be my guess right now if you put it at me. But again, they'll probably do whatever will piss people off the most, so they could shut him down at like 12:30 on Sunday. That's also very Jetsy. So there's that.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I haven't heard anything new today, but I think you keep your head on a swivel for that though, because it's looking spicy that he might not be a go, which would disappoint a lot of people. It's really crazy, Steve, that we are in week 14. I remember week 1 like it was yesterday with George Blaze asking, should we pick up Jordan Mason? And we were unequivocally, yeah, we pick up Jordan Mason. And we were also on the Zach Moss train, man. We were also, we've been on a ride. Rashee Rice was healthy, doing well. J-Mo hadn't yet got his first suspension of the season. It's been wild.
Is he going to get 3 this year? Will he get the 3rd one?
You mean you want him to get a hat trick?
I do.
7-16.
No, Hardy's going to get suspension during the playoffs.
I don't know. I dubs are important. I think that when we look at 7-6, and even people fighting 6.
Oh, that's part. Sorry, Bob. That's part of his DD. We'll dive into that.
I just love the last week when people are fighting for playoff spots. I know Joe's fighting for one in our 8-man home league, for the glory of the belt.
I am.
Maybe he gets it. Maybe he gets it.
Over 4 and 6 years, man. I need to get this.
Yeah, Austin. Okay, so you know where I stand on this week. I'll restate it, but Joe, go for it first this time.
Yeah, so you were on Jacoby yesterday. I 100% remember that.
I'm heavily on Jacoby, yes.
Yeah. So I don't think I'm going to be on Jacksonville. So that's going to take BTJ out. I like JSN. I like Jennings. I'm not on the JMO buzz. I get that Detroit could score 1 billion points, but I'm just not on the JMO bus. So at the end of the day, I'm JSN, Jennings, and I guess Jacoby. Like Tyreek Hill should not be getting discarded on any list of 3, but that's where he's at. Until they start throwing that ball downfield in Miami, there's something that's broken there, and it could be just the fact he's not fast enough anymore. But that's where I'm at.
Yeah, and Austin, I think that, like I said yesterday, I am heavily on Jacoby Myers against a really bad pass defense, and with a quarterback that has no choice but to throw the ball. So I could easily see him clearing, 30 plus passes in this game, which opens up a lot of room for both Jacoby and Brock Bowers. When it comes to these other guys on this list, JMO has a good matchup. A very plus matchup for JMO. I think if you assume that JMO has risk, I think he's worth a play this week because Jacoby, I think, has a high enough floor that you can risk JMO. Mm-hmm. Looking at JMO's ADOT, it's sitting at 13.7, which is pretty good. Not the craziest highest in the league, but it's still pretty good. When you come over and you look at what Green Bay does well, it does align to the things and talking out of stats for a minute, and Joe talks about this a lot, divisional matchups are really much different. Okay. Mm-hmm. So when you go into a divisional matchup, you have to say to yourself, okay, well, things aren't going to play out like they always do. Right.
Relative to the other teams on your schedule.
Right. Relative to the other teams on the schedule. So looking at Green Bay's sitting there with an ADOT allowed of about 8. Okay. Mm-hmm. So, it fits right in there where Green Bay is good enough at keeping most things in front of them, which JMO likes to blow the top off. And I'm okay still rolling with that. There's a little bit of an inherent risk there is that they're not letting the ball go further down the field. So that's where that risk is for JMO, is that he might not be able to break a big one over the top, but he might get those little ones like he was getting last week in that 8 to like that 5 to like 20 yard range, but they're not going to let him blow one over the top. And with JMO's volume, that's a concern. If he can't blow one over the top, that's the inherent risk that you're taking with JMO.
And that's why I don't want to take him. If you go off of mine, I took your 3 volume guys, Austin.
Yeah, so. And I think when it comes to the Jets, and Miami's playing the Jets. I think that I like Tyreek a lot. If Tua wants to take the top off, if Sauce Gardner isn't playing, there's a very good chance that Tyreek's going to make some noise in this game. So my initial lean is still Jacoby, JMO, and Tyreek, but it does have inherent risk attached to it. Juwan Jennings is safer. JSN is safer. But if you want a little bit of if you want a little chutzpah in your matchup, You could go JMO. And again, JMO's on Thursday. So you might not want to do that. And I could very easily pivot off JMO and move into Juwan Jennings. I could very easily do that, depending Brock Purdy's health.
Would you drop Addison or QJ for Gamewell to cuff him with Barkley? Dropping QJ scares me a little because Ladd is hurt and he might miss some time in the future. Yeah, I wouldn't be cutting QJ. I mean, that is a fair point, Jesse. So the thing with Saquon is he's not hurt yet. I mean, let's start there. And at some point, Philly knows that this way of playing doesn't work without Saquon. It's not like Gainwell's going to step up and start doing 150 yards.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of this is Saquon is the only person who would be able to do this.
Yeah.
So if I were in charge of Philly's offense and you just told me, boom, you can't use Saquon anymore, I'm not using Gainwell anywhere to the same degree that I was using Saquon because it won't work. Right. They're going to become a passing team. So I look at that and say, overall, I don't think it's worth it to drop either of those two to get Gainwell.
Yeah, that is definitely. I wouldn't do that. I would keep both of them. I think that both Addison and QJ have a better weekly chance of putting up points. But again, if they don't fit within your roster construction, and you want to drop them, and Gainwell fits better into your roster construction as a whole. Because again, I'm assuming Addison and QJ aren't starting for you right now.
Yeah.
But you're right in assuming that if Ladd is out, QJ is going to get a bit more involved. He's going to drop balls. He's going to have that happen, but he's going to get more involved. And Addison is already very involved. It depends upon your if you want to assume some risk. There is risk in dropping these guys because they could be startable on another team's playoff bound structure, whereas Gainwell isn't unless Barkley goes down. And let's hope that doesn't happen. Quincy, need 2 wide receivers and 3 flex. Bucky, Debo, MVS, that is, Westbrook, and Myers.
And then he also has as Harrison and Pickens.
Okay. Bench 1. I'm benching Debo, I think. I'm
benching Valdez. I don't want 2 all or nothing guys. And I have more faith in Westbrook.
Okay, so you said Pickens. I think Pickens is going to be solid this week. I think he's.
Unless Pickens and Harrison is a separate question here. I'm counting 5 players and his bench, and then goes and Harrison and Pickens.
Okay.
So if I'm looking at this and I'm picking 3 flex out of this group, because I'm probably am playing Harrison and Pickens, my 3 flexes would be Bucky, Westbrook, and Myers.
Yeah, Quincy, just as a clarification, if we're only picking 3 guys from this specific list, it would be Bucky, Westbrook, and Myers for me too. I would monitor the health of Bucky. But that's kind of how I would navigate it as well. Because you're definitely starting Pickens and MHJ, I think.
Yeah, you are.
Pickens for sure. MHJ, yes. But again, MVS, not a lot of volume, but it has gradually increased in terms of the route participation. So you got to ask yourself, is it a smart call in that respect? And looking at the Giants as a team here, they're not, from what I can tell here, they're not giving up a lot of deep plays. So that could hurt MVS in the long run.
The other part is you can't have 2 all or nothing guys. And again, as I said before, I'm really much bigger on Westbrook than Malvez. All right, so bench one of these guys. Lamb, Higgins, Kupp, and Granado.
Grendo.
I think that's what I'm benching, dude. I think I'm benching Grendo. And unless it turns out Higgins ain't playing, I think that's the direction I'm going.
Yeah, you have to be on Lamb and Higgins here.
Yeah.
We We talked about Lamb. When we were talking earlier, there is a volume concern that could arise with Cooks. That is absolutely true. The matchup for both those wide receivers, though, is phenomenal. And when you look at this list, they are must starts. So then the play, then you're asking yourself to pivot. Do I do Cup and Cup or Guerrero? Also monitor CeeDee Lamb's health because again, Dallas is going nowhere. He could easily pull I'm a little too hurt here.
Now his difference is he's already under contract, so I doubt that happens to him.
But he still could be hurt. I mean, so I still think that there is a lot of risk with CeeDee Lamb this week. I mean, you have to start him to a degree, but there is more risk than there ever has been with CeeDee Lamb right now. So I think that I'm on Lamb, Higgins, and Cup, but the stat sheets say I could easily pivot to Higgins, Cup, and Guerrero. Guerrendo's just very much a player that deserves to be in a starting lineup this week. It's a great matchup. It's a great matchup for just the lines. It's a great matchup for him. I think he needs to find a way into the lineup. I really do. But those three guys, I really can't find a way to take them out of my lineup. That's the other problem. That's the fundamental problem with these four guys right now.
And like I said, I have him ranked at the bottom of the tier. So DJ Moore, an injury where the quad doesn't seem serious. Steve, we love you being on top of it with all the injury updates. Would you rather play Westbrook Akine versus Jacksonville or DK, Jennings, or Wilson? So I'm not playing Garrett Wilson, Ronald. But yeah, no, I think I'm playing. I need to know the rest of your lineup because it's gonna be a lot to get me to take DK out. DK is the one I would definitely want to start first of that group. But if you're in a spot where you have a good floor, you're already 5 projected to win, I can see you putting Westbrook in over Jennings. But I definitely want to keep DK in there.
No. You're not listening to the question. He's asking, should he play Westbrook over DK, Jennings, or Wilson? And you just said you don't want Wilson in your lineup. So
so that's math. I saw in my head I answered for didn't I? Instead of this is why you're the teacher, man, and I'm just a dude.
But yeah, so Ronald, there is like I've been talking about all episode with Westbrook Akine. There is inherent risk with him. Mike Evans, Wednesday injury report. Healthy to questionable, asshole. When we look at Westbrook Akine, the volume, and it's the percentages again, if Will Levis is able to throw the ball 30 times and is able to reach the average completion percentage that Jacksonville allows of 64%, then there is a really strong chance that Westbrook is going to have a lot of targets to play with. However, if Will Levis only throws the ball 23 to 25 times and reaches his average, which is around 55, 60-ish %, we're in trouble if we start Westbrook Akine. If Will Levis meets somewhere in between, let's say throws 28 passes, gets a completion percentage of somewhere higher than that to where his height was of 79%, right? Then you're looking at a day where Westbrook Akine is going to have targets regardless. So it really depends on which Will Levis shows up and what Will Levis is asked to do, because it could very easily swing in the favor of Tony Pollard. Joe, can you look this up for me real quick? How many plays a game does Tennessee run? Because this will really solve the Westbrook Akine debate this week for most people. And how many plays a game that do the Jets run? Because I think that that's going to be the most important signal for us to see what's going to happen with these two players. Because Wilson's volume is still there. That hasn't gone away. But the passes have gotten worse. So that's bad. Will Levis is not good, but the passes have gotten better. So there's a lot to play with there. as we go through thinking about this. And Joe's just looking this up. Ronald, we'll come back to this as Joe looks that up, so that we can keep pushing here along. But my initial lean would be to start Westbrook-Akine over Wilson, but I want to see where the time of possession lies for these two teams, because it really will dictate how I fall in this discussion. Derek, top 3 defenses you would want for the playoffs. I want Denver, but Denver's not going to be available. I think Denver's a super valuable defense going forward. I also am, we talked about them a couple weeks back. We recommended picking them up. They've played really well for a lot of teams, and that's the Los Angeles Chargers. The Chargers are a defense that is worth considering. Denver week 16, New England week 17. I really like that New England play there. I also like the Chargers against Tampa. If they're able to cause turnovers, Tampa throws the ball a lot. They've been running a little bit more with Bucky recently. That's important. So if you're asking me top 3 defenses in general, it's got to be like Minnesota, Denver, and the Chargers for me. But if you're talking about potential defenses that are available,
All right, so I don't know if it cut out on Bob there or on me, but to answer your question here, Derek, as I was going through this, Denver's a one that we kind of look at a lot because they have an incredibly strong defense. They got Indy coming up here, and then they got the Chargers and Cincy. So you got a little bit of issue here at the end. I think the real answer is that there's going to be a lot of streaming you want to go through your defenses in your playoffs, because you also have the scenario here where Atlanta, not a good defense, but an absolute great landing spot. Week 15, Vegas, week 16, Giants, and then they come out with Washington at the end. So you certainly don't want them for Washington. The way that I think the best way of hitting the defenses is that unless you have an absolute stud machine, Buffalo might be the closest one to this, but they start with Detroit in week 15. That you're going to have to be playing the loop and hope. The best case is you play one of these teams that have fully quit. Jets are a great example there. Carolina didn't quit. I thought they were going to. Jacksonville has quit. On that regards, Tennessee is a very good defense to run out there, with the glaring exception of week 15, they're playing the Bengals. So if you're getting teams that you're playing a lot of quit, you got yourself a good possibility. And then, like I said, the obvious teams that look like they're quitting, Cincinnati, the Jets. You want to look at the teams that look like there was really high probability that they were going to make the playoffs and nothing happened for Miami after a loss this week. All of those are what you want to look for in your matchups, Derek. But as we're sitting here right now, it's vitally hard to just say this is one I want to sit on for 2 reasons. A, Detroit exists and Detroit blows up a lot of these minefields. And the other part is there's just so many easy ones taking on a team that just quit. And unfortunately, there's a lot of them. I wasn't able to get Granado or Dizzy off waivers. Should I take a flyer on McCormick? Who are you cutting? Because at the end of the day, you're kind of getting to the spot where you're never going to play these guys anyway. So you might be best off pausing. I'm not personally on the McCormick bus, but it's always one injury away from you are. So
I don't know what that was.
That was the internet hates you. But my answer basically, KJ, would be I don't think that you're going to be doing any of these guys anyway. So going out and cutting them doesn't really do a whole lot for me. So that's how I would do that.
The other guy, KJ, I understand you couldn't get Garendo, but you can look up that Israel Apakanada guy that they just signed. There's a little bit of possible usage there if you're looking for a guy that could end up starting in like week 16, week 17, maybe. So I think that he's worth picking up. I don't really, I know that the Raiders running backs have had good games down the pipeline, between like a 12-ish points or so. But if you're looking for a home run, you could still look up, I can't say his name accurately, but his first name is Israel, and then the last name starts with an A. It's a hodgepodge of letters. I don't know how to say it, and I don't want to, disrespect him. But you could look there. So, Nick, would you start Juwan Johnson or Noah Gray over Disley this week? I think that it would be reasonable to start Juwan Johnson or Noah Gray. One of the things to keep in mind is that Juwan Johnson, once Taysom went down, or if there's not another tight end in the picture, he does get a good amount of targets for a tight end. Foster Moreau is also supposedly going to be fully healthy for the Saints. And if you remember back, what was it, week 1 or week 2, both of those guys caught a touchdown, and they were getting a lot of usage. And so this could very easily be one of those games where one of those tight ends will get a decent amount of usage. So playing Juwan Johnson is a good enough play. Noah Gray is in kind of the same situation, right? It's basically these two tight ends are worth starting, but they're in a kind of no man's land of starting because there is a share of some sort. Noah Gray's share is going to be a little bit smaller than Travis Kelce's share, right? Whereas Juwan Johnson's share has a chance to be elevated a little bit more if, in fact, they don't want to throw the ball to Foster Moreau. I would lean Juwan Johnson, but I do like the usage of Noah Gray. I really do. It's just not a lot.
And Nick, I'm still going with Disley. I'd rather have Disley over both of them.
That's
so let's
fair.
see your waiver moves here. Philly's defense for Noah Gay, Romo for Wright, Westbrook for Bigsby. Are you okay on these moves? Well, Bigsby's out, right? Like, he ain't coming back, right?
Tank?
Yeah.
Let me look it up.
But I'd rather keep Philly's defense than Noah Gray, just straight up. In terms of your kickers,
Bigsby's healthy, man. He's healthy. Bigsby's healthy. I'd rather have Westbrook than Bigsby. I'd rather have Romo than Wright, and I'd be okay with Philly's defense over Noah Gray. I would. I would be perfectly okay with that. I think they're fine.
George, it's not that I'm never going to support DJ Moore.
DJ Moore took me to a chip. Took me to a chip because I traded him last year when he had that 50-point game, and then I ended up getting Travis Etienne and a couple other guys.
So basically, getting rid of DJ Moore took you to a championship.
Took me to a chip. Steve was straighter. Yeah, these kickers going IR are going to kill us, and ones getting cut are going to kill us. As we say earlier, just keep your head on a swivel. Absolutely keep your head on a swivel when it comes to these kickers. I don't think you need to make a kicker decision until Saturday, to be honest with you. Because then you're going to know the weather a little bit more. But it's always a good idea to look for people in domes, in games that are going to be relatively high scoring, or at least a modicum of high scoring, so that there's a chance for both field goals and extra points in there. Yeah, Nick, I think it is fair when, looking at Gray, Disley doesn't have competition necessarily for his volume right now. It's low volume, but he doesn't necessarily have competition to it. And Noah Gray.
I also think there's the possibility of Disley going up if Ladd is out. And with him being listed as doubtful, that seems more likely.
Yeah, he could be leaned on a little bit more with the same discussion as, QJ could be leaned on a little bit more. Disley could be a little bit more reliable than QJ. Josh Palmer is proving that he's not really doing anything. Quincy, sit one. Kyron, Gibbs, Monty, Garendo. You can't sit Kyron. Kyron has a really good matchup this week.
And sit Detroit.
Buffalo allows more points to running backs to catch the ball. Okay. Kyron doesn't really do a lot of that right now. But the touches and the volume is there for Kyron, that if he's going to be successful, it can happen in this game. It's a good matchup for the lines. as it goes to Gibbs and Monty here, it's been proven that both of these guys can do well in a given week. It just depends on how much do you want from this Thursday game, Joe?
This isn't a normal Thursday game because they both have had a week.
I understand.
So, but I want to keep my 3 known commodities and roll them out. This is for the playoffs. The worst thing in scenario is your little track star only gets 5 carries. And then that is a possibility. And then you're done. So I want to go with the 3 that have given me known value all year.
I see that. And that's probably where I'm at too. I
already got to buy, aka 2 buys now. That's what I'm talking about, Jason. I wouldn't have to play this week and next. So it's only 16 and 17. Should I stash defenses now for those 2 weeks? I'm not opposed to it. I like that idea because there's no reason not to. So the best defense, I'm looking ahead into week 16, going off of points projected against. It looks like there's 2 that are going to stand out in that category. Buffalo and Baltimore.
I'm not on. Well, Baltimore's gotten.
Buffalo's playing New England at home. That could be a snowstorm where nothing happens. So that's option 1. When you look at Buffalo right there, and then you might just write Buffalo for both of them because in week 17, AK second last game of the year, AK January, AK Rodgers isn't playing anymore. The Jets aren't going to put up any points. So you might be able to get away with Buffalo for both of them. It's not, you certainly could do worse than in that situation. Other teams that have quit that you could go at for week 16, the Saints are playing Vegas. If you want to do the playoff team, play some teams that got a chance. Green Bay's not going to be able to do that. You can't use theirs. They're playing too good of teams.
But you can, Joe. You're just thinking it from that implied points total and the perspective of.
I do implied points total because I think Buffalo gives you the best combination of
I'm okay with Buffalo.
Bad weather, low scoring game, and turnovers.
But I'm not writing out Green Bay because even though they're playing high powered teams,
I don't think there's a whole lot of good options for 16 and 17 aside from like Buffalo.
I like Green Bay because Green Bay, even though they're going to be facing off against teams that have the potential to score, I don't think that it's wrong in assuming that their strength feeds into this team, to these offensive strengths as well, which allows for opportunities for turnovers.
My problem is if I'm penciling in Buffalo against New England in week 16, I'd only be using Green Bay in week 17 at Minnesota, and I think that's a shootout for the playoff spot.
I get it, but I'm saying even in shootouts we've seen 3, 4, 5 interceptions. You get
sacks. There's no doubt about that.
Sacks are an option there. I'm not writing off Green Bay at all in any of that discussion. Broncos are a definite must start against the Bengals in week 17.
Because you get picks.
Looking at the Chargers being a definite start against the Patriots,
week 16.
Most likely there. And then, I think that's solidly where I'd be at in that discussion there. And maybe the Lions if the 49ers don't have any.
Oh, and also Tennessee's defense in week 17 against Jacksonville, who has completely quit and won't have a quarterback.
Quincy, just to follow up on this question here that you asked earlier, going back to the last game that they played against Green Bay, which was November 3rd, the total rushing yards that were gained were 138 rushing yards between the 2 running backs and 1 touchdown. So, I mean, I'm okay with that. I'm absolutely okay with that. Keep your head always on a swivel, guys. I mean, you can have players that are dropping like flies, and if you don't get to the waiver wire fast enough, you're cooked. It's Jacoby for me. Ricardo, I could go through all the metrics that will say that I'm a crazy person in believing in Jacoby Myers this week. but there is one unequivocal fact, and it's the fact that they can't run the ball. They have to pass the ball against one of the worst pass defenses in the league. So if that's the case, I know it's AOC. I get it. He's a terrible quarterback. I understand that. But he's the only quarterback to be successful passing the ball against the Chiefs this year. Okay?
Yeah.
That's something. And you're going up against one of the worst pass defenses. Why not start the two players that soak up the most volume in those pass defenses, or that most volume there in Jacoby and Brock Bowers? I mean, both have the chance to be slate breakers in DFS circles. And I think that you can't ignore the volume there. I love JSN and I love Jennings, and you guys know that. We've talked about JSN and Jennings for a couple weeks now. I would find a way to start all of them, but I understand that you can't. So Jacoby's my guy, and I know it's a little bit off the reserve.
So Derek brought up a good point here. We haven't done a DD in a while. The DDQ, by the way, is Jesse, Derek, CC, and George. We're going to hit Jesse's here right now.
Jesse's here.
All right. I currently have the Broncos defense. Which other defense should I hold on to for playoffs? My opinion's Buffalo.
Yeah, and Jesse, just we kind of deep dived a little bit more into these defenses just recently. So I'm going to chalk that one up to why Joe went over that a little bit quicker. But I do think it would be important for you to go in and look at the implied point totals like Joe has shared. Looking at the implied point totals on betting websites and things like that is a really good first avenue.
The problem is they're not available that far. Unless you've done projections, you don't have them.
First line of defense and thinking about projecting forward. The second thing that I would do is I'd be looking at potential weather patterns, okay? Potential bad weather games, even if the defense isn't that solid of a play, right? Then I would be looking at, is this defense capable of causing turnovers? Even if they play a bad team, if they're not capable of causing turnovers or that team doesn't turn the ball over a lot, I don't want to invest in them, right? What Joe said about Buffalo is super duper important. While they only have 29 sacks on the year, which ranks them approximately almost they're 19th in the league in terms of sacks. Where they're at their best, they're fourth in interceptions. They're coming out third in fumbles recovered. They're coming out fourth in fumbles forced. You physically, within a great matchup like it is against New England, you can't go wrong with the Buffalo Bills. All of the optics are there.
The Bills and the Jets, it's great, man.
Everything you're looking at is there. Another team to look at if you're looking for something spicy on the schedule and you want to do a little bit of research too, Arizona Cardinals. They're not causing a lot of interceptions, but they're getting a good amount of sacks, good amount of forced fumbles. So that's another one to keep on your radar as well. But I think sticking to defenses that cause interceptions against teams that pass the ball a lot, that's why I mentioned teams against the Cincinnati Bengals. They're going to pass the ball a decent amount moving forward. Minnesota's going to pass the ball a decent amount moving forward. Broncos as well. They cause a lot of interceptions. I think it would be a good idea, and the Packers as well, to keep your head looking at those teams. Even if you don't pick them up now, they're going to be worth it. They really are, especially if you're rewarded with points, in that kind of discussion. Would you start Westbrook-Ikhine over Lamb? Because Lamb plays on Monday, and he's still dealing with those 3 injuries. Jesse, I think we honestly are going to get a good look by probably by Friday as if Lamb is going to be a good, honest, serious no-go or not. And it really depends. And like we broke down for you earlier, if you are going for a risk, but you already have solid floors, solid high floors already from your team, you can take the risk on Westbrook-Ikhine. Joe, what was the amount of plays the Tennessee run? Did you ever look that up?
I wasn't able to find it. Long story short, you got disconnected, and I wasn't able to keep looking. Had to start talking again.
But yes, I do think that Westbrook has legs this week over Lamb for the one stratospherical fact that he's getting targeted where it matters and doing something to turn those into touchdowns. Which is fair. Is unsustainable. It isn't sustainable at all. And Lamb could very easily turn one of his targets into something long. But Hurt, with a quarterback that's not that great, with a team that hasn't been moving the ball so much, but not bad, and not being looked at so much in the red zone. I mean, those things do matter, Jesse. I mean, they really, really do. And I'm going to go in while we talk to Derek here on the next deep dive. I'm going to go in and look at that the amount of plays that Tennessee runs a game to see how heady that play might be. So I'm going to look that up right now, Jesse, and we'll come back to it.
So Derek, PPR 3 flex. Your running back room is Kamara, Monty, Chuba, and Ricard. Your tight end room is Kelsey McBride. I need running back help for the playoffs. Should I trade a tight end for Bucky Irvin, or who, in your opinion, with a good playoff schedule ahead? All right, good starting spot. So Kelsey or McBride gives you a pretty good chance of getting a tier 1 or a tier 2 guy. So if we're looking at, ideally speaking, who has the best slate of guys that I want to run the ball against, it's going to be an expensive price tag. I doubt you're able to get it, but the best one without a doubt is Bijan. That is the cream of the crop. He is playing in the playoffs, Vegas, Giants, and Washington. Yeah. You will run right through them with a team that's hungry and will be fighting for the playoff spot all the way. You're going to have to cut McBride to do it, and probably a little bit of extra too. That is the premier go get them spot if I'm you, Derek. You're probably doing Kamara and McBride to do it. I might do that for Bijan. Other ones that have decent-ish ones that that might be a decent play for you here. Minnesota is playing against Chicago and then Seattle in your entry round and your semis. Those are defenses you can run on. You look here, the next one's downfield. Obviously, Pittsburgh's going to be out of the equation. Philly, you can play Philly any week whatsoever. So Saquon's always in play. I think he might be more expensive than Bijan, but Saquon certainly is in play. Mm-hmm. The cheap one, I keep saying, it's because they don't play crap, is Tennessee. You can get Pollard or Spears. You might be able to pick Spears off your waiver wire as Pollard's usage is declining. But you can do probably Chuba for Pollard straight up. So I would, Tennessee's one worth looking at. That's your cheap option, your mid-tier. Kind of going through it there. And then again, Tampa's not a bad call either. Though week 15 will be rough against the Chargers, but Dallas and Carolina, you can run on them as well. So that's kind of giving a little bit of where I'm looking at as far as the answer, as far as downfield. The problem with Brees is you don't know his health, but his schedule looks nice. So that's where I'm at overall with giving you a couple of names there. Bijan's obviously the big stud worth having.
Yeah, and I agree with Joe here. I also think that if somebody's willing to sell Chase Brown, that it is something that's worth considering for me. Players that people are down on that could potentially do something. We're looking at a lot of players that nobody's going to want to give up right now. Okay. And you're gonna have to put a king's ransom out there. Like Joe said, Kamara can be traded, but with Taysom Hill going down, realistically, unless Kendrick Miller comes back and explodes, there's no reason why Kamara can't be successful with the schedule that he has. We talked about Kamara, and he was a guy that we've been willing to sell all season, to be honest with you. But he is your highest value asset when combined with McBride. If you did want to go out there, Derek, and go out and get a guy like
Bijan.
And I think that when you look at that, Derek, that you have a really good chance to be successful in a trade with those two players. Now, granted, I don't want to give up McBride. The volume is just crazy right now. And I think that Kelsey eventually, once Kansas City secures the playoffs, like they're already secured. But again, once it gets a little bit there, maybe week 16, week 17, maybe we start seeing a little bit more of Noah Gray, and they give Kelsey some rest to get into as they make their way into the playoffs. So I could convince myself to sell Kelsey for a guy like Bucky, but I think it's going to cost you a little bit more to get Bucky because he is hot right now. But with the injury, people might be a little bit down on him for that respect, or might not believe that he could stay hot. And continuing the discussion here, a guy we talked about way earlier in the season, and a guy that we were worried about because of his injury, with James Cook. James Cook has a schedule where, week 15 at Detroit, that could be a tough matchup. But again, people are concerned about Ray Davis eating into some carries, but that happened towards the end of the game. Cook's been
I don't know if you can count that,
producing,
though, with how messed up that game was. They had a giant lead.
Cook's been hot producing touchdowns over the last several weeks since that injury occurred. They faced New England week 16 and the Jets week 17. The Jets aren't like the best rush defense, but it could be sloppy weather too, which could favor Cook again. So you could buy high-ish, lowish on Cook, and I think that he's gonna, propel you into a nice framework there. So you could probably move, let's say, Kelsey and Chuba if you're worried about Chuba's volume with Brooks coming back with the fumbles that he had. You could do that, and you could probably move into James Cook fairly easily. And I like his schedule moving forward. As it goes for the first part of that DD, Derek, in terms of PPR 3, like 3 flexes here, I think that Rashad for your team right now doesn't really have a purpose. His purpose is if Bucky can't go, he becomes a guy. Keep your head out there for Sean Tucker. If Bucky can't go, Sean Tucker's going to be successful. He is the next one up.
He had one game and then did nothing the next 2.
But I'm saying to you, if Bucky goes down, they're using a 2-back rotation. That happens, okay? Sean Tucker's going to step in and is going to get a decent amount of volume because we know Rachaad White is one of the least efficient runners in the NFL.
He is.
So I think it's.
See, I don't know how much of that was just New Orleans is bad.
Yeah. So
I'm not excited about Tucker.
To that degree, Derek, I really do think that I would be moving Kelsey instead of McBride. But I think that Joe's absolutely right. I could get more for McBride right now, especially if I pair McBride and Kamara together. I could go out there and get somebody that's going to be absolutely electric for me the rest of the season. Also, keep in mind, Josh Jacobs, slowly rising up the board.
That's what I'm saying, yeah.
Having some great weeks in a row. Packers look like they're invested in running the ball to a degree. Kyron still out there as well, farting around doing Kyron things.
I don't want to invest in Kyron right now. He's getting a little fumbly and losing some prestige.
He is getting
but hopefully, Derek, we gave you like half of the league. So hopefully you're able to go through the ones that you feel make good sense for the price tag you want to spend.
Mm-hmm.
All right, Steve.
We got to get to CC.
Well, we'll jump back to those other deep dives a little. I just wanted to do a couple of them because we got a couple of quick hits that have replenished the populace. So, Steve, jumping back into the quick hits here.
Thanks, Austin.
You're gonna have Allen, A-Chain, Brown, Moore, Jonnu, and Pacheco versus Tua, Barkley, Bucky, Odunze, Nakua, Laporta, and Swift. That's my matchup. Steve, assuming you wrote your team first, I like your team a whole lot more.
All right, wait. So, Allen, A-Chan, Chase, St. Brown, DJ Moore, Jonnu, Pacheco, Tua, Barkley, Bucky, Odunze, Nakua, Laporta, Swift. Yeah, Steve. You are the A-Chan team, Steve. I think you have a really good opportunity this week to be successful. Jonnu's on a tear. Laporta got those dink and dunk touchdowns last week, but he didn't get any volume last week. The only thing that scares me is in a matchup where it's a perfect matchup for Saquon Barkley, guys. It's a perfect matchup. Saquon might put up the biggest point total for a running back this week, like he did last week. He might do even better this week. But I think that his back end is not as strong as your back end, especially with Odunze there. And Swift could be a good piece for him. That I like the top half here with Allen, Achane, and Chase Brown a lot. The wide receivers are super solid for this week, and the tight end is electric. I think you've got a good, solid, if not more than solid, chance to win this week.
I like it.
I did it again.
All right, Bob. All right, so let's rank these receivers here for Nick. Ahmad, Reed, Devontae Smith, Westbrook, and Worthy. So for me, it's going to go Ahmad Reed. I think that you're going to be good there. Devontae Smith scares me because he gets less volume than Westbrook, and Westbrook's more explosive with it. So therefore, I'm going to put Westbrook ahead of Devontae. And I need to see some consistency with Worthy. Worthy is like the kind of guy I hate more than anything else in fantasy football because his peaks are so massive and his floors are so low. And they're kind of unpredictable about when he goes off. So I would have Worthy as a hard last. And like I said, it would be Ahmad, Reed, Westbrook, Devontae, Worthy.
So, yeah, I mean, Austin filled us in about Tennessee's plays run. I also found that on the year they're running about 60.3 plays, 57 in their last 3, and 50 in the last 1. So assuming that they run the ball, and this goes for Tennessee, assuming they run the ball, let's say 22 times, even if you put it that they're going to run the ball 25 times, that's still about 25 pass attempts for Will Levis. If they up that to 60 plays, if they hold the ball a little bit more, and I mean, Westbrook-Ikhine has been blowing the top off, so that's indicative.
That's been reducing your plays a lot. A one-play drive instead of a 10.
So I think that that's a piece to keep in mind as well. But with Worthy and Westbrook-Ikhine have the same floor, same ceiling to me. With Akine's ceiling being a bit higher. Looking at just what Worthy has put together over the last several weeks, 1 out of 4, 4 out of 5, 4 out of 6, 5 out of 7. That's not, and for 61, 46, 54 yards. It's not that much different than Westbrook right now. They're facing the Chargers. There's a good chance that he can do something against them and get a touchdown there, which would buoy the week for you. But I still think your best chance is with Westbrook. But I'd be okay running Reed and Worthy if I can't pick up Westbrook, because I do think that both Worthy and Westbrook are in similar-ish situations. Different, but similar. I thought I was in the playoffs, 6th place. They have 4 teams all in first place in a 12-team league. Our league never noticed our commissioner only let 4 teams in the playoffs. That's miserable, Quincy. We've had a lot of people on the show coming in complaining about the commissioner.
I understand it.
Unless it's like a long-standing league or a big money league, it's very easy for me to pivot. Unless it's a dynasty league too, it'd be very easy for me to pivot and just be like, hey, I'm out. Like, if we're going to do this nonsense, I'm out. Lipsy, do I bench CD this week for Jerry, Judy, Jennings, or Devonta Smith? Okay. This is a really important question as it goes. Winston's not going to stop throwing the ball, guys. Okay. But he did throw his least amount of passes versus the Steelers. It was snow. There was some issues there, but he's not going to stop throwing the ball. Devonta Smith's not even in the conversation. The Eagles pass at one of the lowest rates in the league. They're not going to have to pass the ball in this game. It is very likely you're going to see a stat line from Jalen Hurts that is going to be like 15 out of 18 for 184 yards, 1 touchdown, but then like 3 touchdowns rushing. Okay. Like,
and AJ Brown's going to have 88 in a touchdown.
Let's not, kid ourselves here. Devonta Smith could have a good game yardage wise, but I think within such a low volume of passing, and he's taking up such a low target share in such a low volume passing offense, it is not possible for him to beat out any of those 3 guys. Okay, so
yeah, and that's not changing unless Saquon gets hurt. I mean, that's what Philly's doing.
For me, I would bench CD for Jerry Jeudy. I know it's weird to say, but the only thing that I have against Jerry Jeudy, and Tyler, I've talked with Tyler about this before, is when all 3 wide receivers are healthy, okay, the volume is distributed very differently. You look at Jerry Jeudy. Jerry Jeudy wasn't even the highest targeted receiving threat this past week when Jameis Winston threw the ball like 58 times, okay? Mm-hmm. He wasn't even the highest target. He just got a lot more yards. So when we look at it, we can say when Tillman comes back, if that starts to normalize back a little bit, and if Winston is only able to throw the ball 35 times, you look at the target distribution. If Elijah Moore is getting targets, if Njoku's getting targets, if Jeudy and Tillman are getting targets, that's 4 guys. They can't all have 10 targets unless he's throwing the ball 40 times. Okay?
And I don't think he's got enough plays to do that.
That's the discussion I have about Jerry Jeudy. I think Jerry Jeudy is a great play for DFS lineups. I think he's a great play in most lineups as well. But you have 3 guys here, Jerry Jeudy, CD, and Jennings, that are getting volume. So I think for you, Lipsy, I think it has to be what volume do you think is going to be better this week? And I think it does come down to weather. It comes down to the starter, who's starting at tight end for Dallas.
Yeah, Shoemaker's in. I'm definitely going CD.
I think it's also important to know what the health of Brock Purdy is. So my initial lean this week, and this isn't just coming from the big game, it's just coming from the fact that Jameis Winston is just going to throw the ball, and he doesn't care how many times he throws it, because this is like his 6th team in the league. It doesn't matter. He's not a rookie. He's just going to do what he wants to do, Brett Favre style, and just keep doing it until it's not successful. And even if it's not successful, he doesn't care. He's the happiest man on earth. He gets to play football in the snow. So I'm on Jerry Jeudy because I think that the volume is still going to be there, and it's going to be good volume. Okay. Mm-hmm. That's where I'm at. I think out of all these guys, Jerry Jeudy is going to get the best looking volume, whereas Jennings and CD are going to get volume. I'm just not sure what it's going to look like. Nino.
Well, I'm fairly certain it's not going to be snowy on Sunday with a low of only 41.
Nino, it's a shame that trade didn't go through. Trying to get Bijan off of him. I got Chase Brown, Cook, B-Rob, Bucky. Love that. I tried doing Cook and B-Rob, but he's wanting Chase Brown, Cook, and Tracy. That's too much, man. It's too much, but it's a good price. It's too much. I don't want to give up Chase Brown or Cook down the stretch like this. And Tracy, but I do want Bijan. How do you feel about that, Joe?
So with his back room, he let's look at it post trade, and that's always
the trade didn't go. The trade didn't go through.
Yeah, I get it, but I'm looking at his roster about what he has after the trade. What would he have? Mm-hmm. So put that back up.
Hold on.
So he has Chase, Cook, B-Rob, Tracy, and Bucky. Mm-hmm. So if he does do Bijan for Chase and Cook and Tracy, he's going to be left with Bijan, Bucky, and B-Rob. Mm-hmm. I can make a really strong argument you can win a lot of games with that. Because right now, Tracy's never hitting his lineup. And you're probably not starting Bucky and eating all those points.
And so, here's the thing.
I think I do this because it's the definition of cutting the fat.
It is the true definition of cutting the fat. The only thing that's holding me back, Bucky's injury designation, B-Rob coming back from that ankle injury.
Yeah, but Tracy isn't doing anything right now. Maybe Bob, let me put it this way. If he flipped it, instead of it being Cook, if it was Chase Brown, Bucky, and Tracy, would you be okay with that?
Yes, I would be. I don't know, Nino. I don't know which one of these guys that you'd rather have on your team. I know you want Bijan on your team for sure.
Yeah.
If Chase Brown, Cook, and Tracy get it done today, and you can walk off into the sunset with Bijan, do it. If there's no question in your mind that that is the play you'd like to hit, do it. I mean, Brian Robinson went off, 16 carries for 103 yards. He has the bye week this week. So, you'd be walking into this week with Bijan and Bucky, and if Bucky can't go, you got an issue. And that's like the primary thing. Like if there was no issue with Bucky, I don't know, man. Like, no practice Wednesday. We know the Thursday reports are better. I don't think I can make this decision until Thursday, to be honest with you. The Thursday report, if Bucky clears the Thursday report, I could see myself doing this trade. But I can't do this trade with B-Rob on the bye this week, knowing that if Bucky doesn't play, I might not make the playoffs. Right? Mm-hmm. So that's kind of where I'm at on that. I like it enough, but we need to see the health of Bucky Irving before we go any further with that. Quincy, my running backs are Tracy and Kyron, my starters. I have Algier Vidal. Would you drop Vidal or wait for if he plays, or get my backup now for the playoffs? Corum or Braylon Allen, Spears on the waiver wire. I think that Braylon Allen's worth picking up this week, Quincy.
I think so is Corum, but I'd rather have Allen.
Yeah, I think it's definitely worth picking up Braylon Allen. Kamani Vidal is probably going to come around and have a good enough career-ish in the NFL as either a running back 2 or potentially a running back 1 for a couple of seasons. But I'm not sure that you can wait for that to happen. It wasn't there last week. It doesn't seem like it's going to be there at least this year. Braylon
Corum's interesting because Kyron keeps fumbling and it's your own handcuff.
Yeah, I mean, Corum's okay. I'm not too sold on the drive that they had. I mean, he looked good, but they've been doing that a little bit every game, and it's there. If Braylon Allen plays this week, he's worth a start, right? I mean, going out there and getting Braylon Allen, if the Breece Hall owner hasn't gotten them yet, yeah, I'd go out there and get Braylon Allen, and I wouldn't have a question about dropping Vidal. Trone, better defense to pick up. Saints who play the Giants this week. Other is the Titans who play the Jags this week. Indy week 16 and Jags.
Oh, it's definitely Titans. Dude, I can't tell you how much I want the Titans.
Well, I mean, I don't, but
dude,
I'm vindictive.
I see your questions here next, George, and I'm not going to jump the gun on it. But Richardson isn't what you call accurate, and Jacksonville will have phoned it in entirely. So picking up the Titans, knowing their playoff run, you just had that one iffy game against the Bengals, and the rest of it's pretty gravy. So
yeah, okay. Here's the thing about the Titans. Okay, they are the literal definition of something and nothing, right? There have been games where they have eclipsed 10 points in fantasy, in the scope of getting like touchdowns, fumble recovery, stuff like that. But there has been
Caleb Williams still throwing them the ball.
There's been 4 games where they've gotten 0. Okay, and so when I'm in my
but those 4 games they got 0 were against real quarterbacks.
When I'm in my playoffs, I am not. Yeah, they were, but I don't want to.
But look at when they played bad quarterbacks, Bob. That's my point. They're going to be playing bad quarterbacks.
So where I'm getting at, Joe, is it really depends on the health of the players. Okay.
Well, we know Lawrence is out, and we know Richardson.
I'm talking about the health.
Better when Richardson's out.
Here. I believe Snead has been hurt. For a little while, so I'd be curious what he's doing. I think it's a sneaky play, Trone. I think it's a sneaky play to go pick up the Titans right now. But unlike Joe, I'm not expecting too much.
I'm not saying I'm expecting a lot either. I'm just expecting wins.
I'm not
expecting
expecting
those 2 games against Jacksonville.
They don't cause a lot of turnovers. I'm not expecting too much. But the Cincinnati game, I would definitely not start them.
No.
But the Indian Jacksonville game is interesting enough because those offenses might not be able to score points. But I'm not going to write them off completely yet.
So George is going, or Indy is going to demolish the Broncos. Dude, I'm totally okay with that. I am not on Team Broncos. I don't want to, and quite frankly, I like the Colts. I just wish you guys had a better defense and a real quarterback. Quite frankly, one or the other would fix that team immensely. You guys just completely fumbled the 4th pick overall by drafting a guy who should be playing running back at best because he cannot complete a pass. That's the fundamental mistake. The guy has played a grand total of like 14 football games since he was 16 years old before entering the pros. And it wasn't enough of a stance. It wasn't enough knowledge to know the guy wasn't good, except for like anyone who watched film knew Richardson wasn't good. So I don't have a problem with the Colts. I actually think you guys are one of the best cities and stadiums in the league. I'm all for Denver losing. I don't like Bo Nix or Sean Payne at all. Like, yeah, go blow them out. Give yourself a little bit of hope going to the end of the year. Yeah, absolutely. And by the way, the Colts would not have beaten the Steelers had the Steelers not knocked out Richardson. Had Richardson finished that game,
Joe, we're moving on. Titans, Bucks, or Cardinals defense this week. Joe gave you some good reasons why the Titans could be an option. I think all three of these are viable options. I would not start. I wouldn't start the Bucks defense though. I would be on the Cardinals. They played well against Seattle the last time they met. So I am on the Cardinals again this week. I am rolling them out into my DFS lineups a lot. Just going on history, they've had a good amount of double-digit point games. They have had a negative game here or there, but I'm on the Cardinals. Joe's on the Titans. I think both are good enough plays this week, with Cardinals being a little bit better. Tucker Kraft or Freiermuth without Calvin Austin this week. Freiermuth's a great player.
Calvin Austin's irrelevant to Freiermuth. With how much they spread the ball around, I think they completed the 10 receivers the last 2 weeks. Calvin Austin's 1 reception on 2 targets isn't really that relevant. When you look at Kraft here, you get to the bigger issue of what is going on with which offense you think is going to score more points. And for me, it's definitively Green Bay. So I would much rather have Tucker Kraft over Freiermuth. I'm kind of without a doubt there. So yeah, to answer the same question twice, I definitely would go with Tucker Kraft. There's going to be more points scored on their behalf. Derek, we hit you up there. Thank you, Ricardo. We love what you guys are talking inside the chat and helping each other out in that regard. It is perfect. Nick Chubb, Elijah Moore, or Parker Washington. We did see Parker Washington get a little bit of an uptick with the connection with Mac Jones. Nick Chubb does not look like the guy of old. Tank Dell, I keep holding out hope he might come back. I have no hope that Chubb is coming back, and this isn't the week you're going to see it anyway. So Chubb of those 3 is going to be the one I'm going to sit. Next one up, Shane. Start Kincaid or Freiermuth. Again, I don't think the Steelers are going to put up enough points to justify it. That being the national 4:00 game with Buffalo and the Rams. I'm not saying Kincaid's going to have a huge game, but I think Freiermuth has a bigger letdown opportunity than Kincaid. And I like to go with the floor in the tight end position. It's how I personally view the position overall. Do I keep playing Aubrey or pick another kicker up off of waivers? So this week, the Cowboys are at home in what's probably going to be a shootout against Cincinnati. So again, I go with the this time of the year, give me domes. That's where you're getting in Dallas, and that's what I would go with. Nino, would you do Chase Brown and B-Rob to your trade before? Yeah, I mean, I'd go for it. But again, before, that's perfect value. You might have to give a little bit more because you're perfect value from your side. It's undercutting Bijan. You're probably going to have to give that third guy with it. And again, if B-Rob is the one you're comfortable doing, I'm okay also throwing in Tracy because, again, you're not using Tracy. Is the Broncos defense fine for the playoffs? I'm also planning on holding on to the Eagles. Well, let's look at how those two overlap real quick. Week 15, Eagles are going to give you the matchup here against the Steelers. That's probably looks like a pretty safe one there. For some reason, the Steelers have like never won in Philadelphia going back to World War II. It's kind of weird like that. And for the second one being Denver in that week, it's Indy. So as you look at everyone lining up, Denver coming off their bye at home against Indy is probably the play you go that week. But Philly and Denver complement each other very, very well.
Yeah, they do.
Certainly good ones to have going forward in your playoff push.
Joe, were you on Frymouth, by the way? The Wi-Fi.
No.
What were you on? You're on Kraft?
I was on Kincaid.
Oh, well, I was talking about Kraft. You're on Kincaid.
I'm a Kraft for
Tell
sure.
Me why. Hold on, whoa. Tell me why.
Why Kincaid over Frymouth?
Yes.
Because I don't think the Steelers are going to score enough points, and they distribute the ball too thinly. Unless they're forcing it to one guy, which is always Pickens. Freiermuth had just had one game where he's had significant target share. They had 10 people catch the ball over the last 2 weeks. So they spread it too thin in Pittsburgh, and I don't think there's enough total points to justify it. Buffalo's going to score more.
But
so that's why I went with Kincaid. But with Kraft was the exact same reason. Without Dobbs playing, Green Bay's going to score a whole lot more points than the Steelers.
I'm okay with that, but I'm also not okay with Kincaid. Kincaid was hurt, didn't play, and is coming off a season where his best scoring game in a PPR setting was coming down here looking at week 8 with 13 points because he caught 4 balls for 31 yards and a touchdown.
And Freiermuth's high was what, 16? He had another double-digit game the whole year. You're looking at 2 one-off guys. I just think you're more likely to get Buffalo to do it in a higher-scoring 4:00 game on Fox than you are going to have Freiermuth doing it in Pittsburgh where they run the ball into submission.
So, Austin, this goes back to all the Nick Westbrook-Akine questions that we were getting. When you look at when you really think about what could happen in this game, and we talked about it just a little bit earlier, if they're running 60 plays a game and that's like their average, and if we look and see, how many plays that a defense is allowing a game. Tennessee is playing the Jags, so just trying to do some quick maths here. The Jaguars they allowed 73 plays per game in the last 3 games because they played.
So you're looking at like 66 plays expected for Tennessee this week.
66 plays. So if you expect that the Titans are going to have the ball 65 times, which, it could be, you split that in half, you cut that in half, just say let's say just like 20, 25 for the, for running. And then you're left there with a decent amount of passes.
Yeah. About 35. Yeah. Which is about on line with their numbers.
So if that's what's going to happen, which probably is more likely to happen, then Westbrook-Akine, I think, is a slam dunk this week. And the maths. So, the maths.
I love when you say that. Start 2 running backs this week. Bijan, Pollard, or Tracy. Nick, this one's easy for me. We're going Bijan and Pollard. And this is someone who's hated on Pollard basically his entire career. But that's who I'm going with. I'm going with Bijan and Pollard. So
I'm going to give you another way to look at this. I like Bijan this week, but again, the matchup is a little bit rougher. But again, he's the best player, and we have seen that they could give up some yardage there. Pollard, for what I've said, for everything that I've said over the last couple of weeks about Pollard, he is a volume sponge. If they get the volume, Tim, like I said, if he's able to run the ball 20 times out of these 25 times and Spears gets 5 of them, he's going to be successful. Okay, he's going to be successful. I'm also not disregarding, though, the matchup that Tracy has this week. It's a good matchup for Tracy as well. But what Joe, I think, is more so communicating with Pollard is that Tennessee is going to put themselves in position to score most likely more than the Giants. And so Tracy's going to have to make more of those opportunities. We already know Pollard can do that. So out of that grouping, you can slide you away from Pollard over to Tracy if you like him a little bit better. But the numbers align that Pollard He's not going to have 6 carries again, 8 carries again. All right. If he gets up there to 17 carries, he's in for a good game.
Mm-hmm.
And he's most likely going to do that.
So Derek updating his trade system. He's now looking at Chase Brown, Bucky, and Cook for Bijan. Bob, how you feel about that?
Well, that was Nino trading for Bijan up there.
Oh, my bad. I'm mixing them up.
And we were looking at a Bijan trade for Derek as well. I think both of them were trading for Bijan. That's too much, man. That's too much.
Yeah, you got to take Bucky out of that or Cook out of that, one or the other.
Too much. Armando, welcome back. Welcome back. For the flex, Leggett and Westbrook and Love over Winston, right? It's Westbrook for me.
Yep.
But I could see a pathway for Leggett to have success. Okay.
But it's only Love over Winston.
And Armando, this is, again, I'm going to specify this. This is not because Westbrook has been on a tear, but it does play a role into the decision. But the maths. If the plays are there for Will Levis, he will be successful. It looks like the plays will be there. If the plays aren't, then it won't be. And Love over Winston, from what I said about Winston is just going to keep passing the ball. Okay. Last time they played the Steelers, he passed the lowest amount that he has all season that he's played a full game. Love, on the other hand, has been getting a solid, 16, 20 points a week outside of the one game where he did not so great. Let me look this up here real quick. So, since his bye, he's had 21 points, 14 points, 19 points. It's not encouraging to have such a low output. So, but the game should dictate that they're going to need to move the ball through the air a little bit more. I can find my saves.
If I can keep Tracy, it's a slam dunk. Sure is, Nino. If you can just do it with 2 of your backs, regardless of which 2 of your backs you do it with, it would be a slam dunk.
Yeah. Mix, start 2, sit. 2 running backs, 2 wide receivers, 1 tight end, 1 flex. Achane, you got to start. You're not benching Achane. You're not benching Jonnu. So that's the start. Achane slots into your running back. Jonnu slots into your tight end. I don't even need to think about tight end.
Yeah, those are done.
Now, Tyreek also is going into the wide receiver position. That's a lot invested in Miami, but I think it will be okay. Coming then to the next wide receiver, so I'm looking at Neighbors or Waddle.
It looks like your choice are Neighbors or Waddle. Yeah. And then your last running back choice is Grenado or Breece Hall or Warren.
Well, we have a flex too.
Yeah, but you have your second starting running back spot is Breece Hall, Grenado, or Warren.
Well, with Hall being uncertain, I think I'd have to go with Grando.
Yeah, I think you do too.
If we get a little bit more about the health of Hall moving forward, he was a little bit banged up in the game too. They kind of took him out a couple plays there too. I think it's smarter to lean on Grando there as your RB2. And then your
flex is either Kittle, Waddle, or Warren.
Yeah, I'm willing to roll Kittle there. I mean, I wouldn't be able to bench Kittle again, even though he had a shitty game in the snow, whatever. The whole team had a shitty game. I don't think that happens again when the weather's good. I'm on Kittle, easy. Mick,
do we prefer a Bucks or Minnesota's defense? I mean, dude, Atlanta looked bad.
Yeah, I'm picking.
You think they could take Cousins to the shed?
I mean, you could get 2-3 interceptions from the Vikings on Atlanta this week. I mean, he is honing in on London. All of those interceptions were London's direction. So that's something to consider. South, start Najee or Grendo?
This is a good question because I have them in the same tier.
Yeah. That's a really good question.
I'm personally going to go with Najee because I know the volume's going to be there. Grendo, his style doesn't lean into volume as much. Grant, he could get you one run for 80 yards and he just won you on that one play. But if he gets run out of bounds, it's nothing. So I go with volume. It's always my tiebreaker, and Najee's going to give it for sure.
Yeah, Joe, I can see where you're coming from there. San Francisco's matchup, though, is really good. I'd have to look into the numbers a little bit more, and I'll do that. I'll do that for you, South, right now as we get to the next deep dive here.
So CC has Kyler, Gibbs, Bucky, Harrison, Hopkins, Ingram, BTJ, Kansas City's defense, Elliott. Rate the team. Also have Laporta on the bench. Thinking on moving BTJ into the lineup, benching Hopkins, and flexing Laporta. So right now, first off, I like that idea of getting Hopkins out. I like how your head's at there. Laporta, he last year was all touchdowns based. Last week, he got 2 cheap touchdowns. Maybe we're starting to work him in. I do think we're going to have a lot of scoring this week. I think you can get a cheap touchdown of Laporta. But just remember the primary role for a Thursday night game, you always put them in their position, not the flex. Doesn't mean you also don't start your other tight end in Ingram, but Laporta should be listed as your tight end. That being said, Ingram between Hopkins is an interesting decision for me in that flex spot. I might lean Hopkins and have Ingram be on the bench out of your whole group there. I think that's how I would lean with this one. CC, this is a must-win situation for you because you need to get in the playoffs, so we can't botch it. Definitely leaning into this Detroit matchup. There's going to be points aplenty. Hopkins and BTJ is the scary one for me. Almost in every question you've seen so far today has been us not selecting either one of them, given the fact that the situations they're in. I definitely don't want to play 2 Jaguars. So, I mean, that part's a given. You're basically question of what you've presented here is, are we benching BTJ or Ingram? And my answer would be Ingram. So that was a long way to get to your starting lineup with Laporta in your tight end slot and BTJ staying in your flex. That's what I would recommend doing here for your roster in a must-win situation.
I don't see much difference between Hopkins and Laporta, to be honest with you.
Well, it's not between Hopkins and Laporta. It's between Ingram and Hopkins.
No, it is. So when I look at all the moving parts here, Joe, he's thinking of benching Hopkins and flexing Laporta. So that means Laporta goes into the tight end spot. And then
Laporta goes to the flex spot as he upgrades BTJ. Either way, he's playing 2 Jags.
Right, but
I don't want to play 2 Jags. That's my fundamental starting point.
Okay, so my starting point here is touchdown potential, right?
Mm-hmm.
Then building off of where the yardage can come from there. Laporta's yardage has been really bad. But there could be
is Jacksonville's touchdown production.
There could be a chance that, and that's why I'm not okay benching Hopkins. Hopkins is on a team that is able to move the ball.
I'm good with that.
He is getting targets and runs up. I think Hopkins needs to stay in your lineup, to be honest with you. And to Joe's point about Ingram and BTJ, when you look at Evan Ingram isn't the focal point so much as what we thought he was going to be leading into this season. I mean, granted, he's been hurt. There's been some things happening there. You go in and you look at last week, Hall had 9 targets. Does that improve this week? Yeah, probably. So then that leaves you with, do you want to start Ingram and Laporta, or do you want to start Ingram and BTJ? And Joe really laid it down for you that you really can't start 2 Jaguars right now. So I think that it's up to you to decide here. Would you rather start BTJ or Hopkins? Because then you have BTJ, like the permutations of this are.
Well, the fundamental decision still comes down to Ingram or BTJ, regardless of which position you put them in. That's still your flex decision.
Yeah. I don't know.
And I'd go BTJ over Ingram. So I mean that's just the answer.
I would go BTJ over Ingram. I would do that. That is the way I would pull that too.
All right, so we're gonna do George, your deep dive, and then I saw we had a couple of quick hitters come in after that. I stashed Ray Davis, Allen, and Corum. Should I drop one of those to go pick up Gainwell? Well, I'm definitely not dropping Corum or Allen.
George, I'm not. You've been holding on to these guys all year. I remember your like team like week 3, week 4. You've been holding on to Braylon Allen and Blake Corum this whole year. And here's what Joe said so adequately earlier that we are going to say it again. Gainwell is not Saquon Barkley. Okay? We can't posit, just like Garendo is not Jordan Mason, just like Jordan Mason is not Christian McCaffrey. We can posit how they're going to work within a system, but it doesn't mean they're going to take on the same type of role as the player above them. Gainwell's okay. He's okay. He's an okay player. He's been an okay player in the league for a couple of years now. The Eagles trust him. He's been with the Eagles for a long time. The Eagles trust him. Is it a bad thing to pick up Gainwell? No. Do I want to give up any of those 3 players, though, that have a defined role and have proven this year that they are actually successful to a degree in their limited snaps, that they can be successful going forward? I get wanting to pick up Saquon's backup. I get it. Because if, in fact, Saquon, something happens to him, Gainwell's schedule is good. Right? So that there is that, right? But I'm not picking up McCormick. I mean, the Raiders are the Raiders. I mean, we've been fooled by the Raiders every single year. Most of us in the fantasy community, not us, but most of us in the fantasy community got fooled into Zamir White at the beginning of the year this year.
Yeah, it's hard out on him.
Most of us got fooled like the prior year before, and the year before that, and the year before that.
Well, before that, they had Jacobs.
You know,
he actually delivered.
He delivered, but you get what I'm saying, right? There's a chance that McCormick could be successful. There's a chance that Vidal could be successful, but Ray Davis, Braylon Allen, and Blake Corum are already in a spot.
Yeah. So I mean, that's the other part is your 3 right now have pathway to the field. Hall could be out. Corum is getting the ball because Williams is losing confidence by fumbling, and they just might pull him. And, you know, Davis is probably the least of those 3 in terms of getting the snaps you're going to want. But you have a pathway here that is proven and could be good. So I would not do that, George, for you there. So Steve gave us a quick hit. The Mega Brick gave us a new deep dive. So love that, Mega. Steve,
love it, Steve.
All right, so we talked about this a little bit earlier. Amari Cooper gives you one big game late in the year when he's not cold. He is going to LA this week. It certainly hits the MO. My fear with this, and this is the only reason I'm giving a pushback on this one, Steve, is I don't think he's clicked with Allen yet. I don't think they've truly connected the way they should have. And with all those other players coming back into the fold at the same time, primarily Coleman, I just don't see Cooper, you know, balling out. This isn't like last year whenever he was already the stud in Cleveland and they finally got a real quarterback. He's one voice among many and has never differentiated himself in Josh Allen's eyes. So we might have a big game relative to 6 teams on the bye, but we are not having that 50-pluser that he dropped last year on Houston. So maybe he's a sneaky DFS, but I don't think he's going to be north of 22 or anything crazy like that. Yeah, Mega Brick must win. All right, let's get it done for you. 12-man redraft. Sitting at 7-6 with 2 other teams. They played teams already eliminated. I play the 4 seed. First, where do we rank the Saints defense this week? So the Saints defense for week 14 is not the worst play in the world. Let's face it, the Giants ain't good. They're one of the better points against matchups. So if your lineup is very heavy on points for, the Saints are not a bad play. Picking teams that have, like I said, bad setups are a good starting point. So I'm okay with that. Bob, starting question: how you feeling on the Saints? Saints defense.
I mean, I we've talked about the Saints, and one of the things, and just going back to the stat sheet here, they've been banged up. They've been really banged up in terms of the defensive backfield. I think that when it comes to New Orleans Saints, they're getting turnovers, at least at a I'm gonna go from week 8 to this past week. So just to see where these turnovers are coming from for the Saints. The Saints are sitting there, and in the last, from week 8 to week 13, they're sitting there with 12 sacks, which ranks them 20th in the league. They're sitting here with 2 interceptions, I believe, which sits them all the way at 20th in the league, tied with a veritable hodgepodge of other teams. And they're also sitting here at 3 forced fumbles, which is basically at the same point as every other team, like, in that 10 to 11 range as well. So I don't really see a pathway here that I would want to start the Saints. I get it because of the bad competition that they face, and that's always an interesting point to go towards here.
Mm-hmm.
And the implied total of this game is going to be really low. But I'm just not sold. Like, unless I'm just shooting for that, like, 3 points, 5 points that I get from a low implied point total, I'm not really enthused by the Saints, to be honest with you.
And that's fair.
There's other teams like for example, the Cardinals. Since week 8 through week 13, they've accumulated 20 sacks, 1 interception, 2 forced fumbles, and 7 forced fumbles. Okay.
So here's his other choice on defense: Detroit, Jacksonville, and Cincy.
All right.
Certainly can't do the Cincy because they don't stop anyone. Detroit, I think, is going to be a shootout, although they might get sacks for you. And I don't think I want to lean on Jacksonville either.
If I were to align myself to any team, granted, Detroit sack totals for the last couple of weeks, that week 8 through week 13, has been basically the same as the Saints, but they've gotten 6 interceptions instead of 2. And so I think when we look at the implications of that, and again, I'm just looking at this on Fantasy Pros, just toggling the switches from week 8 to week 13 here. You look at the Detroit Lions from week 8 to week 13. Detroit has 56 fantasy points in a standard league, whatever the standard league is in there. And then you come and look at the Saints, and the Saints are sitting there with 22. So
Detroit is then.
There is a pathway. I mean, this might be a game where Detroit doesn't get a lot of turnovers, and that's fine, and the Saints do. And that's the gamble that you're playing there. Mega, is that, when you look at it, are you going to be comfortable walking into a game where the implied point total is low, but so is the chance for the interceptions and turnovers? Or do you want to go to a game where the implied point total is a little bit higher and you have a chance at getting more turnovers? Granted, DeVito can cause some turnovers himself as well.
Mm-hmm.
But to that degree, I think that's going to be the important discussion to have with yourself and ask yourself, well, which one do I prefer to navigate myself into? Because if I look at it, Tommy DeVito from week 8, again, he's only started a couple games. Week 8 to 13, sitting down here, he played 1 game, didn't throw an interception. Then you come down and you look at Drew Lock, and Drew Lock threw 1 interception in 1 game that he played. So, I mean, the pathway is there for success for the Saints. Will they take it? I don't think so. I think Detroit has a better chance to do that. Like looking at Jordan Love in that same amount of time that Detroit has had those interceptions, Jordan Love has thrown 3 interceptions himself.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's something. I think it's definitely something to consider within the framework of, and I'm looking up Josh Jacobs hasn't fumbled the ball. So
okay. Second question: Purdy or Goff? Goff's gonna be in a much higher scoring game. I'm leaning Goff.
Yeah, I mean, like Joe, can you give Mega the implied point totals there?
Yeah. So pulling up here, we're projecting that Detroit will put up 25.5, and the Niners are only at 22. So that's a lot when you look at the math that we're doing here.
With the return from injury of Purdy, I do think that the skill position players, if Purdy plays and if Purdy's healthy, that it will be better for them than Purdy himself necessarily. Goff could be really successful in this game. He's going to have to be successful in this game. Understand this: Detroit has their best record that they've had ever, and they don't want to lose that.
No, they ain't losing.
If it comes down to crunch time and this game is on Jared Goff's back, he will put them in the end zone. Okay, yes, he will do what he can to do that. He's a vet. And granted, we're looking back. I mean, you have a game from Jared Goff where he had 85 yards, but 3 touchdowns. You have a game from Jared Goff where he was supposed to go electric, nuclear, didn't at all. Then you have another game where he's okay. He's just fine. And then I don't think Goff or Purdy clears like 20 points this week.
I think Goff goes off. I think the Detroit Green Bay game is about humiliation, and I go with the team with more grit there. Last question of the deep dive of Mega Brick here. Full PPR, sit one of the following: Judy, Jennings, Amal, or Drake.
Mega. That's gross, man.
Those are good life problems. That's what they are.
Yeah. All right. So I could talk myself.
You want to say Drake? I'm saying Judy. For me, that's an easy one. The one I'm sitting is Judy.
I think I could talk myself into sitting Jennings. I like all these options this week, though, Mega. I really do. You're in a wealth of riches here. The thing about Drake London, and the only thing about Drake London in a DraftKings format last week, I think put up 17 or 19 points or something like that, something crazy. He's getting targeted. He's out targeting Mooney by a significant margin over the last 4 games. Thanks, Mega. He's out targeting Mooney by a significant margin. Like, it's not even close. When Mooney has played, he's outgained. It's pretty significant. But my only question is Kirk Cousins going to throw 4 interceptions? Is he going to throw for 275 yards, or is he going to throw for 400 yards? There is a question with Drake there, but you got to start the Drake.
Is Penix going to come in and take them to the win?
Well, and here's the other thing, though, to just build off that. What I was going to say is my decision really comes down, and Mega, you can go back earlier in the episode where we talked about this, but it really comes down to, and I'm going to look this up actually to get the implied totals here as well. But the Steelers are sitting here.
Cleveland's one of the lowest projected totals we have of the week.
Right. But here's the thing. The Steelers on average this year have only given up 58 plays a game. Okay. So, and 55 to Joe Burrow last week. Joe Burrow was successful, right, Joe?
Joe Burrow, yeah. As we started the show off with Austin's question about it.
So the pathway is there that if Jameis Winston, like I said earlier, and you can go back and hear that a little bit more, if Jameis Winston is capable and is going to throw the ball 40 times a game, Jerry Jeudy is the smash play. If he's not,
Not doing it though.
if he's not, then it's Jennings. So for me,
Yeah.
I'm benching Jennings because I think that Amon-Ra and Drake give you a safe enough floor that you can push yourself into Judy and be okay with the results of what will happen from a game if Jameis Winston can't throw the ball 40 times.
All right, half PPRs. We're coming down the home stretch, guys. Appreciate all the love, the likes, and supports that you guys have been giving us. Half PPR, Addison, Mooney, Laporta, Smith, sit and start.
Sit
all
one
of them,
or start
but
them all.
sit Njoku.
Okay, you're sitting Devonta Smith and starting Njoku.
Yeah, I think that's the answer.
I mean, for the same same thing that I've said this whole time about Jerry Jeudy, and Steve, as a owner or previous owner of David Njoku, Steve Garza, will say he's an incredibly hard person to own. But since Jameis Winston has been quarterback, you're looking at, I can't remember when Jameis came in, but since week 8, just looking at week 8,
4 or 5
beyond.
weeks ago he came in.
What's that? What was that?
4 or 5 weeks ago or so.
Okay, so let's just go back to week 8. 7 targets.
Yeah, I think he's 2 and 3 as a starter. So 5
9 targets, 5 targets, 17 targets. He shit the bed against the Steelers in that weather game he went 1 reception for 9 yards. That was frustrating. Coming back, 17 targets, 9 receptions, 52 yards. That's like a Drake London style game, a Garrett Wilson style game. That's not going to happen again. But if he normalizes back to 7 to 9 targets, how many is Devonta Smith going to get? Like, let's not kid ourselves here. It's like, how many is he honestly going to get? Like, I don't want to keep dogging on Devonta Smith because he is one of my boys. But, like, just going down here, you're looking at since week 6, 4 targets, 2 targets, 7 targets, 6 targets, 3 targets, 6 targets. And none of them, he's had 4 touchdowns on the year, but like it has fallen off a cliff since AJ Brown has come back. I can't trust that. I'm willing to sit.
Definitely Mahomes over Wilson.
Yeah,
that one's not close.
Yeah, I'm very easily on Mahomes this week as well. If you joined us a couple weeks ago, I was talking about Mahomes' pathway to scoring above 20 points in a given week. And gosh darn it, Patrick Mahomes proving me wrong again because he got more weapons when he didn't have any weapons. If you remember that conversation, Joe.
I do remember they went out and got some dudes. All right, so this looks like our last actual question of the day here. Pick one, Tracy, Debo, or Grenda. I'm going Debo.
Who am I starting?
Yep.
Okay, so going back to where I said earlier about I'm going to look up where these numbers lie. And with the way, and this was to the Najee Garendo question, as it lies, I give the slight edge to Garendo for sheer explosiveness. Okay? The Chicago Bears are, one of those teams that's sitting there they're allowing a good amount of explosive runs. He's explosive. Najee, like I said earlier, and like you said earlier, is a volume play. If he gets the volume.
Unknown caller.
If he gets
unknown
the volume,
caller, Bob. Getting spicy over there.
No, they're just trying to get me to refinance my mortgage, even though I already have it and it's fine. And I don't want to spend extra money to refinance it because you could just put that money towards the mortgage. Yeah, true. Ricardo, if you could write down in the chat how to phonetically say his name. But
because I have no idea how to do it.
I think that that he does have a slight edge over Najee, but Joe's absolutely right. The volume for Najee does play a role into that discussion. But in for this question alone, I think that when you really look at where the game script lies, is that if the Saints are not a good team against the run, Tracy is just so juicy here. But again, like you said, Joe, is it going to be valuable work? Is it going to be valuable work? And that's the only question I have about these three players. Garindo.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ricardo.
Garindo.
When I'm looking at what they can do, what the Giants can do in the run game here, there is a pathway where their strength in the run game does line up with the weakness of the Saints. So it's Tracy or Garindo for me. But I think Tracy has an edge here for me. I think Tracy does have an edge, Frank.
And that's fair enough. That's going to be our last one.
I'm really low on Debo, guys. I'm really low on Debo. He's gonna come off and just go off for like 4 touchdowns, and everybody's gonna be like, "Oh, I shouldn't have dropped Debo this week." You heard it here first.
Welcome to Local Football Flavor, connecting the fan bases of the NFL.